You've probably heard about the West Bank. And the images that come to mind when you do are probably things like this. But what is the West Bank? Why is it in the news so often? And why is it that what's happening there is so important to the future of Palestinians and Israel? The West Bank is this territory, located to the west of the Jordan River. It's home to 3.3 million Palestinians and more than 720,000 Israeli settlers who live in settlements on the same land. Settlements that, according to the UN, are illegal. The territory also includes East Jerusalem, including the Old City with its historic Muslim, Jewish and Christian holy sites. Since 1967, the whole of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, has been occupied by Israel. The occupation is considered illegal under international law. Most Palestinians in the West Bank are under the administrative control of the Palestinian Authority, PA, which operates without a functioning legislature and under an expired presidential mandate. The last time elections took place was in 2006. The Palestinian Authority was then, and still is, not allowed to govern with any real independence. We'll get to more of that later. Israel's military occupation of the West Bank involves multiple physical barriers, movement restrictions, home demolitions, limitation on political rights and civil liberties, and the illegal expansion of Israeli settlements, which house Jewish-only citizens of Israel. These settlers in the West Bank enjoy the same rights as other Israelis, and an entire infrastructure has been set up to ensure that they remain separate from Palestinians in the West Bank. This includes separate roads and other services, which is exclusively for settler use. Land that is needed to set up this infrastructure and to continue building more of these settlements is simply confiscated from Palestinians. Since the 1993 Oslo Accords, the area of the West Bank that Palestinians can access has been reduced significantly as the number of Israeli settlers has increased from around 250,000 to 750,000. The confiscation of Palestinian land and continuous illegal expansion of settlements has made a complete farce of the peace process that Oslo was supposed to initiate, and the confiscations are escalating. In 2024, Israel confiscated a record amount of land from Palestinians in the West Bank. Now, some far-right Israeli politicians and US politicians are openly calling for the complete annexation of the West Bank. Let's take a closer look at the history of the West Bank. Before the creation of the State of Israel, the West Bank was part of the larger territory of historic Palestine, which was under Ottoman rule. As World War I came to an end, the territory fell under the control of the British. The British Mandate period lasted from 1920 until 1948. During this period, migration of Jews from Europe into what was then called Mandate Palestine, which included the West Bank and Jerusalem, increased dramatically. It was also encouraged and cultivated by the Zionist movement that called for a European-style settler colonial state that would be exclusively for Jews. The Balfour Declaration of 1917 set the promise of this Zionist goal in motion. In 1920, the Jewish population was around 60 to 84,000 people, making up about 10 to 11% of the total population. By 1948, the population increased to around 650 to 700,000, which then amounted to around a third of the total population. The mass migration came on the back of increased anti-Semitism in Europe that predated the Holocaust. As more European Jews settled in Palestine, they acquired land through both legal land purchases and illegal displacement of Palestinian communities by Zionist militias. Riots and revolts from the Palestinian population broke out, but were brutally suppressed by British forces, which also enabled more recruitment into these Zionist militias. In 1947, the United Nations Partition Plan proposed dividing Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. The plan allocated about 55% of the land to a Jewish state, even though Jews comprised about 1/3 of the population and owned less than 10% of the land. The local Palestinian population, which included Muslims and Christians, rejected the plan and was supported by neighboring Arab states. According to Israeli historian Ilan Pappé, Israeli militias began confiscating Palestinian land en masse in December 1947 after the UN partition plan was announced. These militias often committed massacres and were part of the reason why war broke out between Israel and the neighbouring Arab states in 1948. Plan Dalet, which was executed in March 1948, led to mass expulsions of Palestinians and land seizures by Zionists. When war broke out in May 1948, 250,000 to 300,000 Palestinians had already been displaced. By the time the war concluded, even more Palestinians were systematically forced to flee, meaning that a total of 750,000 Palestinians were violently displaced from their homes in what has been called the Nakba. In 1950, the Israeli absentees property law legalized the confiscation of Palestinian land that had occurred before and during the war, barring Palestinian refugees from returning. In the aftermath of the war, the West Bank was occupied by Jordan and remained under the Jordanian control until the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel occupied it. Since then, the West Bank has been under Israeli military occupation. The international community considers the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, as occupied territory. And under international law, the continuous land confiscations by Israel for Jewish settlements and accompanying infrastructure to maintain those settlements is illegal. These settlements range from small outposts to large towns and cities and house hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers. Now, despite its illegality, settlement construction continues, and Israelis, especially new arrivals from outside Israel, are encouraged and incentivized to move to and live in these illegal settlements. In 1993, the Oslo Accords were signed between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, establishing a framework for Palestinian self-governance in parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The Accords divided the occupied West Bank into 3 areas. Area A makes up 18% of the West Bank, and it's the most densely populated area, encompassing 8 major Palestinian cities. It's under the full control of the Palestinian Authority. Area B makes up about 22% of the West Bank. The PA controls civil matters, but Israeli authorities have full external security control. This area also includes a buffer zone around Area A. And finally, Area C covers over 60% of the West Bank and is under complete Israeli civil and military control. This area includes Israeli settlements, Palestinian villages, outposts, and military installations. The Oslo agreements included provisions that implicitly suggested settlement activity should be curtailed, though they were not explicitly banned. In 1994, the largest settlement, Modi'in Illit, was established in the occupied West Bank and accommodated 83,000 settlers. In 1995, Oslo II was signed and stated that neither side should take actions that could preempt final status negotiations, which Palestinians and many international actors interpreted as a de facto ban on settlement expansion. But settlement expansion has continued. So how has all of this impacted Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank today? And what restrictions do they face? Israel's bypass roads in the West Bank connect settlements to each other and Israel, while isolating Palestinian communities, hindering their development and restricting residents' movement. Across the West Bank, 700 road obstacles, including 140 checkpoints, divert Palestinian traffic onto longer secondary routes to prioritize settler roads. Israel constructed a wall that is more than 700 kilometers long, calling it a separation barrier, while Palestinians refer to it as an apartheid wall. The structure slices through the West Bank, not along the internationally recognized 1967 boundary, restricting the movement of more than 3 million Palestinians. Israel has designated about 25% of the West Bank as state land, primarily for expanding Jewish settlements. And Palestinians are frequently evicted and their properties demolished for lacking Israeli-issued permits, which are nearly impossible to obtain. And often, Palestinians are forced to demolish their own homes. Hundreds of Palestinian structures in the West Bank, including homes, donor-funded schools, agricultural facilities, and other humanitarian buildings, have been destroyed or seized by Israel. Official land seizures, forced settlement expansion, and takeovers by settler groups have deprived Palestinians of property and reduced the space necessary to sustain their livelihoods. Limited access to water for farming and personal use has made rural Palestinian communities vulnerable and dependent on aid. The UN and most countries view Israeli settlements as illegal under international law, citing the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits an occupying power from moving its civilian population into occupied territory. The US frequently backs its ally Israel by using its veto power at the UN to protect Israel from diplomatic censure. Legal specialists have argued that Israel's actions as an occupying power in the West Bank are a major obstacle to lasting peace and cause profound hardships to Palestinians. In the occupied West Bank, Israel routinely uses administrative detention, detaining thousands of Palestinians for periods ranging from several months to several years, without charging them or telling them what they're accused of, and without disclosing the alleged evidence against them to their lawyers. According to the Addameer Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, approximately 8,000 Palestinian security detainees and prisoners from the West Bank were held in Israeli prisons as of December 2023, including some 2,800 administrative detainees. Since the 7th of October 2023, around 14,300 Palestinians in the West Bank have been detained by Israel. At least 880 have been killed, and 6,700 have been injured. And according to B'Tselem, over 50% of the land in the West Bank has been expropriated from Palestinians to establish settlements and create reserves for their future expansion, with Israel confiscating around 52 square kilometers of land in 2024 alone. And now, with increasing calls from both Israeli and US leaders to completely annex the West Bank, the future of a framework for a lasting solution looks even more fragile.